Sets it a little bit to the left. 11 yards shy of the record. Williams breaks a hole. Williams had a record book. Ricky Williams runs to the Hall of Fame. Touchdown. Ricky Williams, touchdown.
Yards from the shotgun. Back to throw. Vince looks. Under pressure. He'll tuck it in one. Vince to the 5. Young. Touchdown, Texas. Touchdown, Vince Young. He's done it again. Vince Young has given the Longhorns the lead with 19 seconds to play in the game.
Longhorn Nation, we're back.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. My name is Matt Galatzan and I will be your host. And today I am joined, as always, by my colleague over at Texas Longhorns on SI, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. It was a graduation weekend in Austin. As you can see, the tower right here behind me.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Some not as much news going around with Texas. So today we're gonna do some predictions for you guys, and it's gonna be pretty exciting to talk about. But yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so Friday, in case you missed the show, we went over our regular season predictions, game by game, score by score, all the way through the SEC championship game in Atlanta. Zach had Texas going 11-2 with losses to Ohio State in the season opener, and then Georgia in the SEC championship game. He does have Texas beating Georgia in Athens in that November matchup, but falling in the SEC title game. And then I had Texas going 12-1 with their only loss coming to Georgia in Athens. And then I have them winning the SEC championship. I still really can't decide if I want it to be LSU or Georgia. So I'm going to flip-flop on that all year. I'm going to go with Georgia for right now, just for the purposes of this exercise that we're doing today. But yeah, we're pretty close. What it really comes down to is the Ohio State game and the SEC championship game for us. The matchups of Georgia and Ohio State are where we really differ. But as far as the rest of the schedule goes, we think Texas is going to handle business. That includes matchups to Florida, Oklahoma, in Dallas. There are other road trips as well, and then the end of the season matchup with Texas A&M too. So successful season for both of us from Texas this year. Is there anything you want to add to that before we get into this next series of events here, Zach?
I just think that Texas is going to handle business, but it really just comes down to those 3 road games. So that's where it really gets kind of tricky at some points, because Florida could easily be one of those L's. You never know how it's going to go. But yeah, that's why we're doing this. It's fun to predict. About 4 months out, I guess, from the season, or a little less than that. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and we'll come back probably right before the start of the regular season and kind of revisit these predictions, see if we want to change anything. Maybe change our SEC champion or our losses or our wins or whatever the case may be, because a lot can happen over the summer. People can still transfer out. People can still transfer in. Injuries could happen in fall camp like they did last year with TJ Baxter. So we'll come back to it. But before we get into the actual playoff predictions, we're going to talk Heisman real quick, because since we went through the regular season last week, we didn't mention who we thought was going to win the Heisman. I'm going to let you go first. I think that both of our answers are probably not going to be what people that listen to this podcast are going to, expect, given the name and the theme of our podcast. But Zach, why don't you go ahead and give me your Heisman Trophy winner for 2026?
Yeah, I think it's going to be back-to-back receivers. Well, if you count Travis Hunter's receiver and defensive back, I think Jeremiah Smith is going to win the Heisman. He was only a freshman last season, and you saw how dominant he was. It's pretty scary to imagine what's going to happen next year. I know Julian Sain, quarterback, a little bit unproven, but Will Howard was somewhat unproven despite being a veteran whenever he got there. So And being able to throw to guys like Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith really helped to boost Howard's draft stock and get to the league. And so I think Jeremiah Smith is going to continue to produce no matter who's at quarterback. It's going to be a dominant season for him. And, some Texas fans might wonder, why not an Arch Manning prediction? Well, I think Arch is going to have a great season, and I think he's already shown that he's, worthy of the hype, even if it's been in limited action. But I just think that winning the Heisman, that's a really big deal. And I think despite having a great season, Arch isn't going to be able to get that far when it comes to his success in 2025. Maybe 2026 will be a year where he could do that, but I just don't know. I don't see him quite reaching that next season. Maybe a Heisman finalist could be a realistic thing for him, but personally, I just don't see it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably going to be a finalist at least. He's definitely going to start off the season as one of the favorites. I think everybody realizes that going into this. Just the Manning name alone is going to give him, an opportunity to get in there and have his name mentioned. I don't think that he's going to have a consistent enough year to be a finalist. I think we're probably going to go on through the year. I think he's going to beat Ohio State, and then that's probably going to set the Heisman thing. It's going to set it on fire, right? If he walks in there and he beats Ohio State, and he has a good game there, then he'll be the front runner early on in the season, just because he'll have his Heisman moment. That was a big win, and those kinds of things. I think as the season goes on, you'll start to kind of see Arch there'll be a little bit more ebb and flow. He'll have some good games. He'll have some games where he looks a little bit more inexperienced and makes some mistakes. Like that matchup in Athens, I think is going to be a really tough one. That's going to be probably the toughest environment that he faces all year. So maybe that's a game where he struggles and then he bounces back in the SEC championship game. But by that point, maybe it's a little bit too late for him to close the gap. I think like I said, I do think he has a chance to be a finalist though. It'll be close, but at least heading into to the 2026 season, he'll definitely be the front runner, and then that'll probably be his best chance to win it, because I do think he's coming back in 2026. I think everybody thinks he's coming back in 2026 for the most part, if you've been paying attention. But that's kind of where I have Arch.
Can there be 5 finalists for the Heisman, or is it just the 4? Bless you.
Thank you. Tried to mute that for the sake of our listeners. Yeah, I think I honestly I can't remember. I think so.
Yeah. Because that would boost his chances, obviously, of being a finalist if there's potentially 5. Yeah, I guess I could have Googled that as well. I was just wondering.
I know
if there's 5 finalists, that could be better for him to get to New York at the very least. So we'll see.
So apparently, since 1982, the most common total to have been invited is 5. That's happened 11 times. There's been 4 finalists 10 times, 3 finalists 9 times, and in 1994 there were actually 6 finalists. So yeah, that's a possibility.
Because I believe when Vince Young in 2005, it was Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Vince Young. I think that was only 3.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm not one of these Heisman historians that can name you the second place guy from 1956.
Yeah, me neither.
That's never been my strong suit. Yeah. But I think you're probably right about that. If you're wrong, I'm sure somebody will comment or add us on Twitter for every mistake that we ever make on this podcast. So
please do.
Please do let us know when we're wrong and when we're stupid. But no, for my Heisman winner, I'm going to go, I think you're probably spot on with Jeremiah Smith, because he's going to have as much hype, if not more, than Arch Manning coming into this year, because he was an absolute demon last year. He was impossible for everybody to stop except for Texas. They held him to 2 catches for minimal yardage. And there was also a lot of graphics going around after that game about how Texas was shading him with 3 or 4 guys, and it was really just that wasn't the case. There was a guy that they had cropped off screen, and it was it was this huge thing. But he's just going to be better in year 2. I think that Julian Sands is going to be better than Will Howard in terms of his downfield passing and his ability to maximize Jeremiah Smith's strengths. He might not win as many games because, again, he's a young quarterback, but I think he's more physically gifted as a passer. So that'll work to Jeremiah Smith's favor. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go with Lenoris Sellers out of South Carolina. He's projected to be, as long as Arch doesn't come out, which, again, we don't think he will, Lenoris Sellers is the favorite to be the number 1 pick right now in most people's eyes, I feel like. He's definitely in the conversation alongside Cade Klubnik and Drew Aller and a couple other guys. But I think he's going to be the best quarterback in the country next year. I think that, his legs and his arm and all the things that he can do, and that offense is going to be so explosive, and he's going to have a lot of Heisman moments of his own. South Carolina is going to be a really good football team. I'm looking at their schedule right now, and they're going to be they have an early season matchup against West Virginia or Virginia Tech that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And then, you're going to have matchups against LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Clemson. And that'll give him a lot of opportunities to put his talents on display. And I think he's just going to have a hell of a year. So I'm going to go with him. And then, I don't want to project the finalists necessarily because that's kind of an exercise in futility. There could be this year, nobody expected Ashton Genty to be there. And there was other guys that rose and fall. After the Michigan game, Quinn Ewers was high as a kite in those rankings. And then, it kind of dropped off after his injury. So anything can happen there, but I think he'll probably,
I remember when Quinn got injured, and Arch came in and had the 5 touchdown game. Even he was being included in the Heisman odds for last season. Potentially he kept the job or something. So yeah, you really just never know. I remember that was absolutely ridiculous. But
yeah, that was crazy. But I think it'll probably be something like Lenoris Sellers, Jeremiah Smith, Cade Klubnik, and maybe a couple other guys in there. But either Lenoris or Jeremiah Smith, could bring it home, or Cade Klubnik. Clemson's going to have a ton of NFL draft picks this next year. Some people are projecting them to tie the NFL record for first round draft picks by a single team next year with 6. So if Klubnik comes out and has a big year and leads Clemson to an undefeated season and an SEC title or ACC title, then he could have a shot as well. But it could be any number of guys. But why don't we get into our playoff predictions? We'll start with yours, and then we'll roll into mine.
all right.
Here's what it looked like last year. This was the bracket last year. You had Ohio State at the 8 seed. They ended up going all the way to the title game, but Oregon was your number 1 seed. You had this is not the most visible. Georgia was your number 2 seed. Boise State was your number 3 seed. Arizona State was your number 4 seed. Those were the teams that got the byes. And as we saw last year, every team that had a bye was knocked out of the playoff in their first game. It was Boise State was the highest group of 5 champion. And that kind of vaulted them up in the playoff rankings, and that kind of vaulted them up to number 3. Arizona State went in the Big 12, gave them the number 4 seed. Texas dropped to number 5 after losing the SEC title to Georgia. Otherwise, they would have had the number 2 seed. And I think if they had the number 2 seed, they probably would have coasted their way to the finals against Ohio State, because I do not think that Notre Dame could have beaten them, but here we are. And then, Oregon as number 1 seed just got absolutely crushed with these matchups. They had to face Ohio State number 1, and if they had won that game, they'd have to play Texas. So that's been a point of contention, because the number 1 seed theoretically should have the easiest path to the final because they played the best all season. They should be rewarded for that. there might be some changes to the format here coming up the next couple of years. I don't know if they're going to get it done in time for the 2025 season. I hope they do. If they don't, here we are. But for example, Texas is the number 5 seed, starts off with Clemson, and that was an easy win. And Arizona State looked like it was going to be an easy one until they took their foot off the gas, and Arizona State crept their way back in it. So, that was one. And then, Penn State here going SMU, Boise State, Notre Dame. That's also arguably the easiest path as well.
Yep.
So, they need to figure out a way to fix all this, but I digress there a little bit. But
yeah, I think with Ohio State, it was, they're I feel like they're going to be an outlier when we are multiple years down the line looking back. When it comes to an 8 seed being able to go on a massive run like that, I think it's probably going to be a little bit of an outlier from that point of view when it comes to be like, oh, it's to the 1 seed face the 8 or 9, But I think there's other parts that definitely need to be addressed when it comes to the seedings, when it comes to the conference champions, and then the buys as well. So, but yeah, you looking back, Texas really could have used some of those red zone conversions and Bert Auburn field goals in the SEC title game against Georgia, because I truly believe they would have beaten Notre Dame in the national championship had they gone there. But definitely, if they had gone to New Orleans, I think they would have been able to do that as well. So, yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you there. But let's jump into your predictions first, and then we'll roll into mine. We'll start with your overall rankings.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I got Ohio State at 1, Georgia at 2, and this is the CFP final rankings. Georgia at 2, Clemson at 3, Arizona State at number 4. So those are conference champions right there. And then Texas at 5, because I predicted that Texas would lose an SEC championship against Georgia again next season. Sorry about that, but that's just what I'm thinking. And then so the 6th seed, I got Penn State. I just think that Penn State, Drew Aller as a Heisman finalist potentially. They're going to have another elite season, but of course with Penn State, they're probably not going to get it done. It's just how things go in Happy Valley. So, but still going to be a CFP team. LSU at number 7. They're kind of scratching the surface at certain times last year, but way too inconsistent as a team. But I think they'll get in. And then Oregon, I think Oregon has a really easy schedule. In my opinion, they avoid Ohio State. They play Penn State. I forget if that is in Eugene. I believe that is on the road. But they don't have much of a non-conference. They host Oklahoma State. So I think Oregon will get in just based off their record, and potentially being able to get into the Big Ten title game. We'll see how that goes. But and then I got South Carolina 9. Like we talked about with Lenore Sellers. I think he's going to have a great season, and being able to do that while leading South Carolina to the CFP could probably get him to the Heisman finalists, potentially even win it. So they're going to have a good year. And for the final 3, I just kind of was trying to make some, bold predictions potentially. Kansas State, at 10, and not winning the Big 12, but probably making it to the title game and having a good regular season could get them in. Syracuse, the ACC is not the strongest. They had a good season last year under Fran Brown. I believe is their first or their most wins in however long. I think first 10-win season in quite some time. So I need to look at exactly the years on that. But they add Jonte Cook, of course, the former Texas wide receiver, and then the Notre Dame backup quarterback as well. So just thought it'd be interesting to pick them at 11, and then 12 UNLV as a potential Mountain West champion, being able to sneak in there as the 12. I just think they'll be ranked too low to be able to get to where Boise State was last season, but I think 12 will be a good spot for them there, just based on what the other teams will do. So those are the rankings for me.
Yeah, I mean, we should note this is the final rankings with the seeds, because
right
the seeds are going to change based on like where conference champions are, based on what the structure was last year. If that ends up changing, that's one thing. But these are the seeds, not the the actual rankings. These are just the final seeds. So continue.
Right. Yeah, and I tried to rank it based off how the format is when it comes to seeding the conference champions. So I believe I was accurate enough on that. So hopefully, if I get close to the predictions for next season, it looks somewhat like this. But yeah, I think that Texas as a 5 seed face UNLV in the first round based off the seeding. Texas, I believe, will win that game. And, it lines them up with another matchup with Arizona State in the quarterfinals. I think since Arizona State's going to be the Big 12 champ again, the way the seeding will work out, I think Texas will be able to play them again and beat them again. I think it'll be a much easier win this time around for Texas. And it's kind of a similar path. Texas faces Ohio State in the semifinals, number 1 Ohio State. But this time they'll get the job done and then face Georgia in the national title game. But I think Georgia's going to get the win in the national championship over Texas. So that's just the most important part of the bracket, obviously for this show's point of view. But on the rest of the bracket, I think South Carolina will upset Oregon as the number 9 seed. Slight upset there, but then they'll lose to number 1 Ohio State. Then I got Penn State beating Syracuse and LSU beating Kansas State. And then Clemson and Georgia with those buys beat Penn State and LSU respectively. So the Final Four is Texas, number 5 Texas versus number 1 Ohio State, and then number 3 Clemson versus number 2 Georgia. And then again, the national championship is Texas versus Georgia, with Georgia winning. I just think that Texas will be able to get to the game this time around after 2 semifinal appearances past 2 years. They'll be able to break through a little bit, but not quite win it all. I just think that winning it all in Arch Manning's first year as a starter is obviously the dream for Longhorns fans, but I think it'll come up just short for Texas, and it'll be disappointing. But I think looking back, it'll obviously be a very successful season. I just think that's just how I see it going. And I don't know. What do you think about my bracket, and how accurate do you think it might be?
I like your bracket. I can certainly see Arizona State winning the Big 12 for one thing. The Big 12 is going to be one of those conferences that I think has the potential to eat itself alive again. But Arizona State is going to be one of those teams that's certainly competing for it, and that matchup against Texas would certainly be a good storyline as well because of what happened last year and all those things. And then again, with Texas and Ohio State, it's kind of the same deal. Based on what happened last year, the CFP would certainly love to have those teams facing off again as sort of a revenge tour for Texas. I like your South Carolina shout. I have them making it in mind as well. So spoiler alert there. And the Syracuse one is an interesting pick. I think that Syracuse is going to be a lot better than people think. I think Fran Brown's got good stuff going on there. I'm really high on Clemson next year. I think that they're going to be a really good football team, so I can certainly see them making the semifinal as well. I think Cade Klubnik's going to have an outstanding year, like I said earlier. And I do think Brian Kelly's finally going to break through and get LSU to the playoff this year after a couple of disappointing, showings for him in Baton Rouge. But overall, I really like it. I think it's realistic. I'm not as high on Georgia necessarily as you are, but I do think that they're Georgia. They're going to be there at the end somewhere. It's just a matter of where and when and those kinds of things. But, Kirby Smart's not going away. I think Gunnar Stockton's going to take a big step forward next year. So I could certainly see them competing for a national title as well. I also like the breakdown you had with the different conferences. You had 4 SEC, 3 Big Ten. I think that that's probably going to be the standard next year, just like it was this past year with those teams kind of dominating most of the rankings. A couple Big 12 teams in there and 2 ACC teams as well. And then the group of 5 that I still don't like how the group of 5 gets in right now. If they make it into the top of the rankings, that's fine. But allowing them to get just the highest ranked conference champion in there is, not my favorite part of this whole format,
Yeah,
but it is what it is. But yeah, I like your rankings a lot. I think that it's certainly a realistic scenario. If I had to change anything, I would probably knock Kansas State out.
Yep.
Just because I don't know what Avery Johnson's going to be next year. I think he has a chance to be really good at quarterback for Kansas State, but I don't know if they're going to outlast BYU or the other Big 12 team that I have in my rankings that we'll get to here in a minute.
Yeah, BYU, I was considering them at that spot or somewhere in there, maybe at 11. And BYU had a great season last year. Kansas State, not so much as people had expected. But I don't know. That was kind of more of a wild card pick. That could be absolutely wrong at the end of the day. I felt pretty good about the other ones, but that one was kind of my, shot in the dark sort of pick because you just really never know with some of these brackets how things are going to go. As we saw last season with some of the teams falling where they did. So we'll see how that one goes. I don't feel too confident about it. I'll admit that.
Yeah, I mean SMU is one of those teams that not a lot of people
Right.
saw making it last year. So, anything is possible. Boise State's another one as well. So, again, at the end of the day, these are just projections. So we're probably going to be wrong on a few of these here and there. But overall, I think you did a pretty solid job with those. So nice work. Let's let's jump into my rankings now. So here's what I've got. For my final seeds, I have Texas as the number 1 overall seed. I have them, again, going 12-1 in the regular season and beating Georgia in the SEC championship game. So that'll earn them the number 1 seed, in my opinion. I have Penn State number 2. I just think that they're going to have the edge over Ohio State. This is going to be the year that James Franklin kind of finally pushes through for them. I do think it'll be Ohio State and Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. But I think that Penn State finally gets the better of them there and earns the number 2 seed. Clemson, I think, is just going to roll through the ACC. They're going to be a really good football team. The ACC is not a great conference, so they're my only ACC team that makes it in this scenario. Actually, I have Iowa State winning the Big 12 next year, which is, it could be any one of 5 different teams probably that they get a chance to get in there. But I like what Iowa State's got next year. I know they lost those 2 receivers to the NFL draft, but they're going to have a pretty good football team and a relatively easy Big 12. And they're not going to have the toughest schedule in the Big 12 either. I've got Notre Dame returning as well. I just think they've got too much coming back to not be in the playoff again, and they're going to have a real solid season. Georgia is my number 6 seed. And then I have Ohio State at number 7. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, but I think the inexperience at quarterback is going to come back to bite them at the end. I also have LSU and Oregon in there like you do, and South Carolina. My other Big 12 team is Texas Tech. They just did so much in the transfer portal this year. They're just crushing it on the transfer portal recruiting trail. So I think that's going to pay dividends for them, and they're going to be able to sneak their way in there and have a good year. And then my group of 5 team was Memphis. I think they went 11-2 last year. They're going to have a real good shot in an AAC that doesn't have a lot of contenders in there. They have a real good shot to have an undefeated regular season and win that conference. So I think they'll be the highest. Maybe they won't go undefeated, but I think they're going to be at least the highest ranked group of 5 team. It's going to come down to, I think, them and probably UNLV, maybe somebody else. I don't know if UNLV is going to have enough to overcome Memphis there in that final ranking. But I've got 4 SEC teams, 3 Big 10 teams, 2 Big 12 teams. Notre Dame's the independent in there. And then I have Clemson as the ACC and Memphis is the group of 5. And then round 1, I have Notre Dame beating Memphis. I have LSU beating Oregon, and then probably a close one. I just think Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a tremendous year. So, and he's another one of those guys that has a chance to be the number 1 pick and a Heisman finalist as well. So I think he pushes them through to round 2. I've got Georgia facing Texas Tech. I don't know if that's going to be a close one. I think Texas Tech's going to be much improved, and obviously making the Big 12 or the college football playoff, they're much improved. But I think Georgia's going to be too much for them. And then I have South Carolina upsetting Ohio State, and probably the biggest upset of the first round. And then, or the only upset of the first round, I guess, that I have, but definitely a big upset there. And then round 2, I have Notre Dame getting by Iowa State. I have Texas beating LSU. I have Clemson beating Georgia, and it will probably be, I think, the best game of this group of games. Texas and LSU will be a hell of a matchup as well, but I think the Clemson-Georgia game is probably going to be one of those classics that we remember for a long time. And then Penn State over South Carolina. And then I have Clemson and Texas making it through the championship game. I think this, if this happens, it'll be one of the best stories, that we've seen in a long time with Cade Klubnik being an Austin native and going up against a team that, recruited him pretty hard. And before obviously Texas ended up with Quinn, but they were in on Cade Klubnik early on in the process, and him facing off against his hometown team in the championship would be great. But I have Texas breaking through, finally winning their first national title on the 20th anniversary of their last title. So our Arch breaks him through. He lives up to the hype and earns Texas a national title there. But give me your thoughts. Tear it apart, Zach. What did I do wrong? What did I do right?
I wouldn't say anything wrong. Just different for me. I think Texas Tech was a good inclusion there. That's something definitely to feel more confident about than my Kansas State prediction. But I just was trying to get a little bit wild with it. But I think that'll be really interesting, that matchup there with Georgia potentially. But yeah, I didn't include Notre Dame in mine, but that's a really good inclusion as well. That's just me personally feeling that way, that they'll come up just short. But it's hard to imagine that Marcus Freeman won't have them ready to make another potential run to the title game. But as you can see here, they're coming up short. But yeah, I think they'll definitely be in the mix. It's very realistic. But yeah, we both agree when it comes to Clemson that they're going to be ACC champion, one of the top seeds for sure. And I think it's interesting how you have Ohio State 7. I know they're just 8 seed, obviously, but a lot of Buckeye fans may not like that, seeing that 7 next to Ohio State right there. So expectation is that they'll have like a bye or whatever next season. But as we saw, you never know what happens during the regular season. They could drop a game or two. We've got to get past Michigan again. So 7's realistic, but that might surprise some people. And then Penn State potentially is a Big Ten champion, finally being able to kind of break through and get some sort of hardware. Made it last year, lost to Oregon. They just haven't been able to really get over the hump when it comes to certain things. So the 2 seed, that's probably the one that I disagree with the most, is Penn State at 2. Everything else is really good, but I just don't have confidence in them, when it comes to winning it all. I think they'll make the CFP, but that's just my opinion. So, but yeah, Texas winning it all. I know we'd all certainly like to see that happen for sure. I don't know. I just think that with the inexperience of this year's team, I think winning it all is just a little bit too much of an ask. That's just me personally. It's just too much to ask, in my opinion, with a younger group. I think last year's group, if there was any team for Texas in recent memory that was going to win it, I think it was going to be last year's group, just because the experience they had. The way the path set up for them. If they hadn't had to face Ohio State, I think it would have been the year. But that's just my opinion. I think that the experience for the Longhorns won't be quite enough to get them all the way there to win it. Definitely be able to make it, but I say that, and yet I had them losing the national championship. So if you get there, you have a chance to at least win it. But yeah, I just think that the experience is gonna be a bigger deal. People realize, and Texas is still gonna have a great season, but that's just my opinion. So, but yeah, I think it's great. Kind of interesting to see where some of these matchups might be in our predictions. I know the quarterfinals are Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, and Cotton Bowl. So kind of interesting there. I don't know if I like the Rose Bowl as a quarterfinal. Kind of seems kind of disrespectful to college football having that there. But then the semifinal is going to be a Fiesta Bowl in Arizona and Phoenix, and then the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. So interesting to see once we look back on this when the season starts, where the locations would be and how teams might line up, and where Texas could find themselves. Because if they're in the quarterfinals, the Cotton Bowl is another location again this year. Being able to be in Texas for home field advantage potentially. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, no, I like your bracket, and I think yours is better than mine, and probably will end up being more accurate than mine once it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. As was the case last year, all the first round games will be on campus. So in this scenario, Notre Dame will host in round one. LSU will have a playoff game in Death Valley in round one, which would be probably pretty epic. I would assume a lot of arrests there in Baton Rouge that weekend. Georgia would host against Texas Tech, and Ohio State would get a home playoff game there. And then the quarterfinals, it's the Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl, Rose Bowl, and Sugar Bowl. I would assume that in this scenario, you would probably get, I guess, Georgia and Clemson in the Orange Bowl. You would probably get Texas and LSU in the Sugar Bowl. Maybe in the Cotton Bowl. Texas and LSU could be the Cotton Bowl. Georgia and Clemson could be the Sugar Bowl. Penn State and South Carolina could be the Orange Bowl. I think Notre Dame and Iowa State kind of by default would be the Rose Bowl. But it could go either way. And then the semifinals would be Fiesta and Peach Bowl. So I would assume that Texas and Notre Dame would be Fiesta. Clemson and Penn State would be the Peach Bowl, and then the national title is going to be at in Miami Gardens, Florida next year. So Texas would have to win a national title in SEC territory in Florida. So that could be interesting. And then if we go back to yours, Texas would be hosting in round one. Oregon would be hosting. Penn State would be hosting, and LSU again would be hosting. So we both have a LSU home playoff game next year, which would be which would be really exciting. I think in your quarterfinal, Texas and Arizona State would probably
Cotton Bowl.
I think that's probably the Cotton Bowl. And then the Orange Bowl, I would imagine, is Clemson and Penn State. The Rose Bowl is probably South Carolina and Ohio State. And then you'd have Georgia and LSU in the Sugar Bowl. I think that would probably be a lock there. And then in the next one, Peach Bowl's got to be Georgia and Clemson. And then Texas and Ohio State in the Fiesta. So, a lot of interesting possibilities there. I think that's one thing that's always super interesting about the college football playoff is the matchups and where they are. Because this past year, as we saw Texas having to go to Atlanta multiple times to SEC championship and against Arizona State in the Peach Bowl was not ideal. I decided not to go to that Arizona State game because I hate the Atlanta airport. I think it sucks. And we wanted to kind of save our travel funds just in case of the potential national title, which I guess was also in Atlanta. Is that true?
Yes. Last year, you mean? Yes, it was. And so Texas, if they were to win the national championship, that means they were going to have to go to Atlanta 3 times, SEC championship, quarterfinal, and the title game. And that is just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, that was the path this past season. Yeah.
And there was no way in hell that I was going to go to Atlanta 3 times in like 5 weeks. So that's why we sat that one out. But
yeah, we got lucky. Got to go to Arlington instead. So at least that one was a short drive.
Yeah, that one was easy for us. But why don't we wrap it up there? We'll come back on Wednesday and we'll have a more traditional show, where we talk some Longhorns news. We'll accumulate a couple things here, get into some other Longhorns topics. But that's going to do it for another edition of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. You can listen to us on every major podcast platform out there. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, and more. We're also live on X, Facebook, and YouTube, so you can catch us there as well. Throughout the offseason, I think we're probably going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday for now, but we'll pop in with as many shows as we can during the week. Sometimes it'll be every day, sometimes it'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but we'll be pretty consistent for our listeners there. Don't forget to check out Texas Longhorns on SI for all your latest news and notes regarding Texas Longhorns sports. And if you enjoyed the podcast here today, make sure to hit the like button and the sub button on all your favorite platforms. But most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them, and we will see you next time.
We'll be back. Yes, sir.
Fight.